In this video, you'll journey beyond the surface of who you think you are and uncover the deeper self you left behind. Through the lens of Carl Jung's psychology, we'll explore how your persona was built, why you abandoned parts of your soul to belong, and what it truly means to return to your whole, integrated self. If you've ever felt like something essential is missing, this is the path back to it. There was a time you knew who you were, not in words, not in thoughts, but in the rhythm of your breath, the way your eyes searched the sky, the way your body moved without shame. There was a time before mirrors, before judgment, before the long exile from your own soul. That self still lives buried beneath years of conditioning, beneath layers of adaptation, beneath the masks you wear so well, they began to feel like skin. The self you abandoned was never lost. It was silenced, forgotten, left behind in favor of the version of you that the world applauds. And though it does not scream, it does not sleep either. It waits. You feel it sometimes, in the quiet between distractions, in the ache that rises when you are alone, in the dreams that refuse to follow logic. That is the voice of the forgotten self calling you home. But home is not behind you. It is beneath you, beneath the stories you tell, beneath the roles you perform, beneath the fear of being too much or not enough. It is there in the depths where your real life waits to begin. Carl Jung understood this betrayal, the abandonment of the self in favor of the persona, the social mask we construct to survive. The persona is necessary. It helps you function, relate, belong. But when you believe the mask is the truth, you sever your connection to the soul. You become what others need you to be, what culture tells you to be, what success demands you become. And in this performance, something sacred is sacrificed: authenticity, wholeness, meaning, the self. The path back to it is not a path at all. It is a descent into the unconscious, into the forest of forgotten symbols, hidden wounds, and ancient voices that still echo inside your bones. It is not linear. It does not reward obedience. It rewards truth. Raw, unfiltered, uncomfortable truth. You must be willing to meet your shadow, the parts of you you disowned, in order to be loved. Your rage, your envy, your sorrow, your wildness. These are not your enemies. They are the guardians of your wholeness. Until you face them, you will live in fragments. The self is not the opposite of the shadow. It is its integration. It is not the light that rejects darkness, but the flame that holds both without fear. To reclaim the self, you must unlearn the illusion that your value lies in being likable, predictable, easy to understand. You must become mythic again. Not a character in someone else's story, but the author of your own, the one who descends, who battles, who suffers, who sees, who returns, says this is the hero's journey. But it is not a journey outward. It is not conquest. It is inner alchemy. You must die to who you think you are. Again and again, you must question everything you inherited. You must grieve the years spent sleepwalking. You must break the contracts. You never consciously signed the ones that said, I will not speak my truth if it makes others uncomfortable, or I will not pursue what I love if it doesn't pay, or I will not be fully myself if it means standing alone. Because the self does not bargain, it does not negotiate, it does not dilute. It demands your full presence. It demands your loyalty. It demands you return. And when you do so, the world begins to shift, not because it changes, but because you are no longer viewing it through the lens of exile. You see people differently. You stop searching for validation. You stop performing. You begin to speak from a deeper place, to move from intuition, to act not from fear or strategy, but from soul. But this return will cost you. It will cost you your false peace, your social polish, your need to be understood. You will lose friends. You will lose comfort. You will lose the shallow high of fitting in. But in exchange, you will gain something far more powerful. You will gain the presence that comes from being whole, the calm that comes from being real, the clarity that comes from finally listening. The self is not some ideal state. It is not perfection, it is integration. It is the union of opposites, masculine and feminine, strength and softness, silence and expression. It is not free from conflict. It is free from fragmentation. It is not the absence of wounds. It is the willingness to sit with them, learn from them, become wiser because of them. And when you begin to live from this place, life becomes different, not easier, not simpler, but more alive, more rooted, more meaningful. You stop chasing highs and start building depth. You stop fearing the fall and begin to see that the fall was always part of the flight. You stop abandoning yourself for love, for work, for status, and begin to build a life that does not require you to split in two. The world does not need more success stories. It needs more awakened souls. More people willing to burn their masks, to stand bare and say, "This is who I am, not who I was told to be, not who I pretended to be, but who I truly am." And you can be that person. Not someday, but now. All it takes is a single act of radical honesty, the decision to stop abandoning the self for comfort, for safety, for illusion. All it takes is the willingness to walk back into the fire you once ran from. Not to be consumed, but to be reforged. The self you abandoned is still waiting. Not with judgment, but with open arms. Return. How to reclaim your inner authority. There comes a moment not marked by clocks or calendars when something deep inside you stirs not with panic, not with pain, but with an unsettling knowing. A whisper barely audible. At first emerges from beneath the noise of everyday life. It is the murmur of the forgotten self, long buried beneath masks, beneath roles, beneath the pressure to belong. In that sacred silence between distraction and despair, you may hear it, the ancient call to return. Not to a place, but to a center, to reclaim something that was always yours, yet surrendered long ago. This is the call to reclaim your inner authority, not through rebellion, not through dominance, but through descent. A descent into the unseen caverns of the psyche, where your truth lies bound in chains forged by fear, by expectation, by a lifetime of being told who you should be. You were not born with a name. You were given one. You were not born with opinions. They were taught to you. You did not choose the mask you wear. It was sculpted for you, lovingly perhaps, but blindly. Family, culture, school friends, systems, they all carved at your face until your essence was no longer visible. What you became was acceptable, polite, predictable. And in that exchange, you exiled the wildness within you. The animal, the mystic, the rebel, the god, the shadow. You see, authority is not power over others. True authority is sovereignty over the self. And no one can grant you that. No title, no institution, no applause from the crowd can make you whole. You must descend into the depths and take it for yourself, but beware. What you will find in the depths is not always beautiful. Before you meet your power, you will meet your shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is not the enemy. It is merely everything you rejected in order to be accepted. Every impulse that was punished, every emotion that was unwelcome, every truth that made others uncomfortable. You buried them You hid them so well. You forgot they were even yours, but they did not die, no. The shadow waits. It waits in your dreams, in your projections, in your triggers, in your compulsions. It whispers. Through jealousy, through rage, through shame. And it waits for one thing, your attention. Not to be fought, not to be conquered, but to be seen, to be held, to be integrated. For until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. We are not just minds, we are myths in motion. Within you lives the archetype of the orphaned child, the wounded healer, the trickster, the lover, the warrior, the wise old sage. These are not mere symbols. They are eternal patterns of being etched into the soul across millennia. And your life, though it feels small at times, is the unfolding of these myths. You are not just surviving. You are enacting a sacred drama, a journey older than civilization. The hero's journey is not just for stories. It is your story. It begins with a rupture, a sense that something is wrong, that the life you are living is too small for the soul you carry. Then comes the refusal, the fear, the denial, the clinging to comfort. But the call persists, the world begins to crumble. And so you set out. Not toward glory, but toward the unknown, toward the cave you fear to enter where the dragon sleeps on the treasure of your true self. But this is no fairy tale. The dragon is real, and it wears your face. The monster you must confront is not out there in the world. It lives within. It is your addiction to safety, your need for approval, your fear of being alone, your compulsive roles, your dependence on praise, your inner critic, your numbness. The inner tyrant who tells you to shrink, to stay quiet, to be good, to be small. You cannot kill the dragon. But you can face it, you can sit with it, speak to it, learn its name. And in doing so you will find that beneath its monstrous form is a wounded part of you, guarding the key to your wholeness. That is the paradox. What you most fear holds what you most need. The dark is not the absence of light. It is the womb of transformation. To reclaim your inner authority, you must walk the path of individuation, the sacred spiral inward. This is not self-improvement. It is not optimization. It is not becoming better. It is becoming whole. It is the slow, painful, luminous process of peeling back the layers of conditioning to rediscover who you are, beneath what the world made of you. The false self must die, not in violence, but in surrender, and the ego must bow. Not in defeat, but in reverence to the self, of the deeper intelligence, the inner God image, the totality of who you are and who you are becoming. And this path is not linear. It is not easy. It is not clean. It will break you. It will shatter illusions. It will cost you relationships, identities, comforts. But in its wake, it will give you something. No one can take your center. Dreams are not noise. They are messages, symbols from the depths. When you dream of falling, of drowning, of running from something you cannot see, pay attention. The psyche is speaking. Not in language, but in myth. The anima, the feminine soul within the man, may appear to you as a muse, a seductress, a queen, a witch. The animus, the masculine within the woman, may come as a warrior, a father, a tyrant, a teacher. These inner figures shape your relationships, your desires, your fears. To know them is to begin to see how much of your life is not chosen, but enacted, not conscious, but inherited. The work is to bring light into these patterns, not to judge them, but to understand them. For only in knowing the parts can you approach the whole persona. The mask is necessary. It allows us to function, to participate in society. But when the mask becomes fused with the face, We forget that we are more than what we present. The danger is not in wearing a mask. The danger is in believing you are the mask. That the role is the reality. That the performance is the truth. And so to reclaim your inner authority, you must dare to remove the mask, even if only in solitude, and face what remains. You must become intimate with your own silence, with your own madness, with your own divinity. You must be willing to stand alone, misunderstood, rejected, exiled. Because only when you belong fully to yourself can you truly belong to anything else. The archetypes that rule you. There is a secret architecture beneath your thoughts, a hidden scaffolding holding up everything you believe to be your own. Beneath your preferences, your desires, your ambitions, lies something older, an ancient collective. A realm not made of logic or language, but of symbols, images, forces. These are not yours alone. They belong to the soul of humanity itself. And yet they move you. They shape your choices, your patterns, your pain. These are the archetypes, not inventions of the mind, but eternal blueprints of the human experience. You do not choose them. They choose you. They rise from the deep, unconscious, like gods stirring from sleep. Each one wearing a different face, each one whispering, demanding, seducing, guiding. You imagine you are an individual, unique, autonomous, free. But until you face what moves beneath you are a puppet strung by hands you cannot see. The question is not whether you are ruled by archetypes. The question is whether you will meet them with open eyes or live forever in their shadow. You felt it as a child, even if you didn't have the words, the longing to be heroic, to be adored, to be chosen, the desire to rescue, to conquer, to be seen. That was the hero within you, awakening the call to ascend to triumph, to define yourself through struggle. But the hero left unchecked becomes the martyr, the savior, the one who cannot rest, cannot receive, who burns out trying to save others while forgetting themselves. You see, every archetype has a light and a shadow, a gift and a curse. The moment you identify too much with one, it begins to consume you. The hero forgets how to ask for help. The lover becomes obsessed with being needed. The ruler demands control, even over their own soul. The trickster laughs until they cannot feel. Archetypes do not ask for your balance. They demand possession. They want the whole throne. And unless you become conscious of who sits inside you, they will rule your life like hidden kings, unnamed, unquestioned, unchallenged, the mother, the father, the child, the wise one, the shadow, the self. These are not just characters, they are psychic currents, eternal themes running through your blood. When you feel the need to nurture, to protect, to create, the great mother speaks through you. She is the womb, the earth, the giver of life. But she is also the devouring mother who suffocates through love, who feeds to control, who cripples with comfort. The father archetype instills law, discipline, structure. He is the tower, the sword, the sky. But when corrupted, he becomes the tyrant, the punisher, the distant voice you could never please. These figures are not your parents. They are the gods, your parents embodied. And even when your parents are gone, the gods remain. You carry them like old furniture placed in the house of your psyche before you ever had a choice. Dreams do not lie. They reveal. In dreams, the archetypes remove their masks. A lion becomes a king. A house becomes your mind. A dead child becomes your lost innocence. The man chasing you is your shadow, not some stranger. When the anima appears, the feminine soul within the man, she may come as lover, mother, or muse, seducing you toward feeling, toward vulnerability, toward the mystery of the inner world. And when the animus rises, the masculine within the woman, he may arrive as the judge, The intellectual, the warrior calling you to speak to, lead, to act. But beware if these figures remain unconscious. They will distort your reality. You will project the anima onto women expecting them to complete your soul. You will project the animus onto men demanding perfection or authority, where none exists. To reclaim these inner figures is to reclaim your soul. Integration is not romantic. It is holy fire. It burns away illusion until only truth remains. You wear a persona, a mask designed to make you acceptable. It smiles when you are dying inside. It agrees when your soul is screaming no. It succeeds while your spirit starves. The persona is necessary. Society cannot function without roles. But when you confuse the mask for the face, you forget your own name. You become a role, a title, a costume. The doctor, the artist, the good daughter, the strong son, the achiever, the pleaser, the intellectual. And the more polished the mask, the more empty the eyes behind it. The world may reward the persona, but your soul does not. Your dreams will betray it. Your body will revolt against it. Your relationships will crumble around it, because beneath the mask, the shadow waits. The unlived life, the rejected truths, the archetypes you denied to play your part in the play. The price of authenticity is exile, but the cost of denial is death in slow motion. Every human life is a constellation of archetypal forces dancing, colliding, shifting in endless ritual. You are not meant to become one archetype. You are meant to become the whole. Individuation is the path of wholeness, not perfection, wholeness. It is the art of becoming conscious of the forces within you and learning to hold them, balance them, dance with them without being devoured. It is not to destroy the ego, but to seat it properly in service of the self. The self is the totality, the center and the circumference, the God, within the unifying principle. When you glimpse the self, it is like waking up in your own life for the first time. The archetypes no longer possess you. They become your allies. You are no longer ruled. You become the ruler not as tyrant, but as steward, the king who serves the kingdom of the soul. The journey toward inner authority begins with descent into the underworld of the unconscious, into the forgotten chambers of your own history. You must become the hermit wandering the dark, with only your inner light. You must face the judge, the warrior, the outcast, the mystic. You must welcome the inner orphan, the part of you abandoned by love, cast aside in shame. You must sit with the prostitute, the part of you that sold truth for safety. These are not insults, they are archetypal truths. We all carry them. The question is whether we will bring them into the light. For what you do not own, owns you. What you do not name, names you. And what you do not integrate will erupt in your relationships, in your work, in your choices, again and again, until you finally listen. Why you can't be alone anymore. There is a silence you no longer know how to bear. It used to hold something sacred, a stillness that whispered truths too deep for language. But now it only reminds you of your hunger. Not for food, not for noise, but for distraction. You cannot sit with yourself, not for long, not without reaching for something, a screen, a voice, a task, a drink, a thrill, anything to escape the echo of your own being. This is not mere restlessness. This is spiritual exile. You've been trained to fill every moment with movement, every pause with sound, every ache with stimulation. But behind the curtain of your hyper-connected life, there is a forgotten soul, and it is starving for your presence. The truth is not that you are afraid of being alone. You are afraid of meeting the one who waits in that aloneness, the self, the unfiltered, unmasked, undistracted you, and so you run. But the faster you run from solitude, the deeper you fall into emptiness. Because what you fear is not loneliness, it is revelation. To be alone is not to be isolated, It is to return to the cave, where the soul remembers. Every myth begins in solitude. The hero is cast out. The prophet is driven to the desert. The initiate descends into the underworld alone. This is not punishment, it is preparation. Because only in aloneness can the false self fall away. Only in the absence of applause do you hear what your heart actually longs for, and only in the dark does the inner fire begin to glow. But we've forgotten how to descend. We fear stillness because it is not empty, it is full. Full of suppressed emotions, unrealized desires, unlived lives. We drown in connectivity because silence would demand that we feel, and feeling in a world that worships efficiency and performance is rebellion. But the soul does not heal through performance, it heals through presence. Raw, unfiltered presence with what is. And that requires solitude, not the kind you endure, but the kind you enter like a temple. But temples are terrifying when you do not know the God that dwells within. Alone, without roles or distractions, you meet your shadow. The part of you you've spent your life avoiding. The anger that never had a voice. The grief that was never allowed to breathe. The craving for love that you buried beneath achievement. The fears you dressed as ambition. The shame you hid behind competence. And worst of all, the emptiness, the vast cold silence at the center of your being, where no one else can reach. But this emptiness is not a void. It is a womb. It is the sacred space in which the self is born. The aloneness you flee is the doorway to your wholeness, but to enter it, you must surrender the performance. You must die to who you thought you were, and wait in the dark, not knowing who you will become. This is not a path for the faint-hearted. It is a crucifixion of the persona, a dismembering of illusion, a descent into the underworld of your own psyche. Modern life conspires against this descent. It teaches you that value comes from visibility, that love must be earned through usefulness, that time is only worthy if it produces. And so you keep moving, you keep proving, you keep sharing, posting, improving, until your soul becomes a brand and your identity a product. But you were not born to be consumed. You were born to awaken, to remember, to become something that cannot be measured or marketed, and that remembering begins where the world ends, in the silence of solitude. The soul does not speak in likes or notifications. It speaks in symbols, dreams, aches. It speaks through the body, the breath, the strange images that haunt you in sleep. It whispers through the hunger you cannot name, the beauty that makes you cry. The restlessness that no amount of noise can soothe. These are not problems. They are invitations to stop, to turn inward, to meet the parts of you that are waiting to be seen. This is the beginning of individuation, the path, not of self-improvement, but of soul recovery. To individuate is to pull back the projections you've cast onto the world, to own what you once disowned, to become conscious of what was once unconscious. It begins in solitude, because only in the absence of others do you start to see what is truly yours. What dreams are yours? What values are yours? What desires are yours untouched by expectation or fear? When you can sit in silence without needing to be seen, when you can feel pain without reaching to numb it, when you can be no one to the world and still know your worth. That is power. That is inner authority. And that is why solitude is sacred, because it strips away everything that is not you, so that you may remember what you are. But we fear this remembering, because we have mistaken attachment for love, performance for belonging, and busyness for purpose. We have been taught that to be alone is to be unloved, that to rest is to fall behind, that to feel deeply is to be broken. But the soul does not abide by these lies. It does not speak in metrics. It does not compete. It waits silently, patiently, for the moment you finally stop running. And when you do, it does not punish you. It embraces you like a long-lost parent. It begins to speak softly at first, then louder, until its voice is the only one that matters. And in that moment, you do not feel lonely. You feel known. You feel homes. The truth about instant gratification. You are being devoured not by war, not by famine, not by fire, but by comfort, by the soft, seductive whisper of the now. The flick of a screen, the ping of a message, the quick fix, the sugar hit, the endless scroll. They promise you relief, and they deliver, but only for a moment. And in that moment, you trade your sovereignty for sedation. You think you're choosing pleasure, but you're choosing escape. You think you're indulging your freedom, but you're feeding your chains. This is the great illusion of instant gratification, that it serves you. But it doesn't serve you. It silences you. It feeds the surface while starving the soul, because what you are really hungry for is not more stimulation, but meaning. And meaning does not arrive on demand. It grows in the dark. It matures in the tension. It is born in the place where you refuse to look away from your own emptiness. But we have become addicted to avoidance, trained to fear boredom. To fill every pause, to chase every spark, we are drowning in dopamine and dying of disconnection. Not from others, but from ourselves. Instant gratification is not just a habit. It is a symptom of dislocation, of fragmentation, of the great forgetting. You have forgotten how to wait. Not because you're impatient, but because you're disconnected from time itself. Not clock time, but soul time. Deep time, mythic time, the time of seasons of cycles of becoming. In this deeper rhythm, things do not arrive when you want them to. They ripen, they emerge, they initiate. But the modern world mocks this rhythm. It rewards the immediate, it praises the fast, it monetizes your impulses, and so your nervous system becomes a battlefield. Your will is hijacked, your focus is fractured, your inner world colonized. You are not weak, you are wounded. Wounded by a culture that sold you a lie. That if something isn't instant, it isn't worth waiting for. But the soul does not operate on convenience. It asks for your patience, your devotion, your willingness to walk through the fire, rather than click past the discomfort. At the core of every impulse lies an archetype. The child who wants sweetness, the rebel who wants thrill, the orphan who wants warmth, the addict who wants escape. These are not enemies. They are inner figures calling out for your presence. But when you deny them long enough, they don't disappear. They mutate. The child becomes the saboteur. The orphan becomes the victim. The addict becomes the tyrant. And still you scroll. Still you reach. Not because you are lazy, but because you are haunted. Haunted by unmet needs, unhealed wounds, unloved parts of yourself that keep demanding your attention in the only language they know, craving. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. Every time you numb out, you feed the unconscious. Every time you choose the shortcut, you abandon the path, and the more you abandon it, the more it hurts to return. Until one day silence feels unbearable. Stillness feels like death, but it is not death. It is birth. It is the contraction before creation. And if you can endure it, really endure it, something ancient will awaken in you. Discipline is not a punishment. It is devotion. It is the art of saying no to the impulse. Not because the impulse is bad, but because something sacred depends on your refusal. The sacred cannot be summoned by swiping. It cannot be bought, hacked, or downloaded. It is earned through waiting, through sacrifice, through choosing the meaningful over the convenient. To discipline yourself is to reforge the covenant with your inner world, to turn away from the hollow idol of ease and toward the altar of becoming. And that altar demands offerings, time, discomfort, struggle, solitude. But in return, it gives you something no high can match: integrity, not moral purity, but wholeness, a feeling of being one with yourself again. The parts no longer at war, the self no longer exiled. It is only when you delay the craving that you create space for the unconscious to rise. Not as a shadow, but as a guide, because underneath your addiction to immediacy is a deeper fear that without the noise, you will have to face the truth of your hunger, that you are not okay, that you are lost, that something vital is missing. But this pain is not the enemy. It is the path, the impulse to reach for the phone, the snack, the thrill that is your soul, knocking, not asking to be fed, but to be felt. You do not need more content. You need contact with your body, with your grief, with your unmet longing. The truth about instant gratification is that it offers you everything, except the one thing you truly need: yourself. And until you are willing to sit in the fire of your own absence, you will never return to presence. You will keep cycling through the same loops, chasing the same highs, crashing into the same lows, wondering why nothing satisfies. Pleasure is the new slavery. You were not born a slave. You were born a flame, wild, sacred, unpredictable. But somewhere along the way, they taught you to tame it, not with chains, not with force, but with pleasure, sweet, soft, intoxicating. They handed you comfort, stimulation, reward, not whips, but dopamine, not prisons, but screens. And you didn't even notice the moment the leash slipped around your neck because you were smiling, because it felt good. That is the brilliance of this new form of slavery. It doesn't need to break you, only distract you. It doesn't command obedience through fear, but through craving. And slowly, piece by piece, you gave yourself away, not to a tyrant, but to the algorithm, to the bottle, to the sugar, to the endless parade of things that feel good now and destroy you slowly. You began trading your time for trifles, your presence for pleasure, your freedom for the next hit of relief. And the worst part is, it all felt like choice. But addiction dressed as freedom is still bondage. And you, like so many, have mistaken sedation for sovereignty. What you call pleasure, the psyche often calls escape. Because real pleasure, soul, pleasure comes from alignment, from depth, from meaning. It comes from love that requires vulnerability, from art that costs your ego, from work that calls your entire being into presence. But that kind of pleasure is rare, slow, and unpredictable. And so instead, you reach for the fast kind, the kind you can buy, click, swipe, consume, the kind that numbs instead of nourishes, the kind that keeps you coming back, not because you're full, but because you're more hollow than before. That's the trick. Instant pleasure never satisfies. It mimics the feeling of fulfillment, but leaves you emptier. And in that emptiness, you crave again. It is not pleasure you are chasing. It is wholeness. But you've forgotten the path to wholeness is not paved in indulgence, but in integration. And integration demands what your comforts cannot give you, a confrontation with your shadow, because underneath every compulsion lies a wound, a part of you exiled long ago, screaming not for pleasure, but for presence. The addict within you, the part that needs more, always more, is not evil. It is in pain. And every time you silence it with another hit of dopamine, you deepen the exile. You lose another thread to the self. Jung said that neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. And the modern world is built to help you avoid legitimate suffering at all costs. But there is no freedom without suffering. Not suffering for its own sake, but the kind that births you anew, the sacred wound that opens, bleeds, and heals through truth. The pleasure economy is an avoidance economy. It does not want you healed, it wants you hooked, because a sovereign human one who can sit in discomfort without numbing one, who can wait, who can fast, who can choose meaning over momentary thrill, is ungovernable. You scroll to forget, you snack to soothe, you binge to blur. But the soul remembers, and it waits not to punish, but to awaken. Every craving is a coded message. Every compulsion is a myth repeating itself. The hungry ghost archetype lives in your belly, your mind, your bloodline. Forever empty, forever, grasping. The more it eats, the more it starves. You must meet this ghost, not with shame, but with reverence. Ask it what it mourns, ask it what it truly seeks, because beneath the craving for pleasure is a forgotten grief, a lost self, a sacred need you were never allowed to name. And no amount of dopamine can replace that need. No screen, no climax, no consumption. What you hunger for is reunion with the self, with the divine intelligence buried beneath your masks. And to find it, you must be willing to suffer the withdrawal, not just from substances, but from illusion. The persona loves pleasure. It is fed by performance, by image, by reward. But the self, at the deep center of your being, is not concerned with appearances. It is concerned with truth. And the truth is, you are not free if you cannot say no. You are not free if you cannot fast. You are not free if you cannot feel. Freedom is not the ability to indulge. It is the capacity to endure, to choose what serves your becoming, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because that pain is the crucible of transformation. The fire that forges gold from chaos, the alchemical process the soul has always known, long before the market taught you to equate ease with happiness. Real joy is not a product. It is a byproduct of depth of devotion, of inner alignment. And the price of that joy is the death of false pleasure. You cannot liberate yourself by chasing what enslaves you. You must break the contract not with rage but with awareness. The next time the craving arises, pause, listen. Do not obey it, study it, speak to it. See who within you is calling. And in that pause, in that sacred refusal, you reclaim something forgotten. Not your productivity, not your efficiency, but your soul. Because every act of conscious resistance is an act of remembrance. That you are not a machine. You are not a market. You are not here to be pacified into silence. You are here to burn, to love, to weep, to awaken. And no fleeting pleasure can replace that. How to escape the matrix. Within you were not born inside the matrix. It was born inside of you. Not a cage of metal and wires, but one of mirrors, illusions, and lies. You forgot were lies. The matrix is not some external system you plug into. It is the invisible architecture of the false self. It is the voice in your head that is not yours, the desires you inherited, the fears you obey. The mask you wear so well. You forgot what your real face looks like. The matrix is the dream of the persona. The carefully constructed image, the performance of perfection, the subtle slavery to approval, applause, and belonging. And you believe you are free because you can choose your flavor of prison. But freedom is not variety. Freedom is depth, and nothing in the matrix wants you deep. It wants you stimulated, obedient, productive, but never whole. Because wholeness cannot be bought. Wholeness cannot be sold. Wholeness cannot be controlled, and so to escape the matrix is not to flee the whirl. It is to wake from the spell within. This is the great forgetting that your soul is sovereign, that beneath the programming, the projections, the trauma, there is a flame that cannot be extinguished, but it has been buried. Buried beneath expectations, beneath culture, beneath centuries of psychological sleepwalking. You were taught to look outward for meaning, for love, for power, for truth, and so you became divided, exiled from your center, fragmented by the 1,000 faces you wear to survive. But the unconscious remembers. It whispers in dreams, in symptoms, in strange moods. You can't explain. It sends symbols, the snake, the storm, the child, the grave, not to confuse you, but to awaken you, because you cannot think your way out of the matrix. You must feel your way out. Descend, see what was hidden, face what was disowned. The matrix begins to crack the moment you stop running from yourself. You will not be saved by rebellion, nor by compliance, but by confrontation and the sacred encounter with the shadow. Because the matrix is built upon repression, it depends on your unwillingness to look within. Every unprocessed wound becomes another brick in the wall. Every unlived truth becomes another loop in the script. The shadow is not evil. It is exiled energy. It is the parts of you that did not fit the narrative, the instincts that scared others, the truth that cost too much to speak. It is the real you banished for the sake of survival. And until you reclaim it, you are not awake. You are dreaming of freedom while sleepwalking through life. Jung knew this, that liberation is not the absence of suffering, but the presence of inner reality. The courage to turn inward and find the God image within. That is how you break the simulation. Not by running from the system, but by reclaiming your soul. The archetypes are your blueprint, your map out of the maze. The warrior, the magician, the lover, the sovereign. Not roles, but inner forces, divine patterns that speak through symbols, images, instincts. They live in the mythic dimension of your psyche, and they are the allies you need to awaken. But they lie dormant in the unconscious, waiting for initiation. You cannot invoke the warrior by lifting weights or shouting affirmations. The true warrior is born when you stop betraying your boundaries, when you face the parts of you that collapse to please, when you choose truth over safety. The magician awakens not when you learn tricks, but when you begin to see the world as symbol, as dream, as reflection of psyche. When you realize that the external world is not objective reality, but projection, and every projection is a clue, a mirror, a key. These archetypes do not give you power. They remind you that you are already powerful, but asleep, and their awakening demands sacrifice, the death of the old self, the comfort, the numbness, the familiar lies. Individuation is the exit. Not a rebellion, but a return to the self, the true center, the inner sun. It is not found by chasing success or enlightenment. It is found in the slow, sacred alchemy of integration, of making the unconscious conscious, of weaving together the fragments of your soul that you disowned to fit into the machine. To individuate is to remember the myth you came here to live, to remember that your pain is not random, it is archetypal, that your struggle is not weakness, it is initiation, that your dreams are not nonsense, they are messages from the deep. You do not escape the matrix by running from it. You escape it by waking up within it, by turning inward with eyes that see symbol, with ears that hear myth, with a heart that recognizes the self in all things. Then the simulation collapses, not because the world changes, but because you do. Your shadow is hungry. You feel it in the quiet, that gnawing presence behind your smile. It does not speak in words, but in impulses, in the sudden rage you can't explain, in the strange dreams you try to forget, in the cravings, the compulsions, the guilt that clings to your pleasure. You try to outrun it with noise, with tasks, with virtue, with light. But the more you run, the louder it grows, because your shadow is hungry, not for destruction, but for recognition. It is not your enemy. It is your double, the buried half of your truth, the forgotten sibling of your soul. And it has teeth not because it wants to harm you, but because it has been starved for too long. You were taught to be good, to be kind, to be light. And in that pursuit, you exiled everything that didn't fit. The anger, the envy, the wildness, the desire to dominate, the fear of being weak, the lust for power, the ache to scream. You buried them. You labeled them wrong. Bad, shameful. But what is denied does not die. It waits in the dark, and it feeds on your denial. The shadow is not darkness itself. It is your light twisted by repression, your vitality disowned, your genius disguised. Every part of you could not integrate became part of the shadow. And so you walk through life half awake, projecting what you cannot face. You see the narcissist, but not your own ego. You despise the coward, but ignore your own fear. You pity the lost, but fear your own confusion. What you hate in others is often what you've rejected in yourself. This is the great mirror of the shadow. It reflects what you most need to reclaim. Not to indulge it blindly, but to hold it consciously, to bring light into the cave. Not to erase the dark, but to understand it. Because your wholeness lives in the place you dare not go, in the wound you haven't licked, in the memory you swore you'd never revisit. Jung warned us we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The work is not to become pure, it is to become real. To feed the shadow is not to give in to your worst instincts. It is to acknowledge them, to bow to the parts of you that have been screaming in silence. The rage you suppress becomes passive aggression. The sexuality you disown turns into manipulation. The vulnerability you mock becomes arrogance, and all of it poisons your relationships, your work, your soul, until you stop, until you sit in front of the fire you've been avoiding and let it burn. That is the ritual, to sit with what is raw, unprocessed, forbidden. Not to fix it, but to feel it, to name it, to trace its shape. What does your anger want to say? What does your lust want to create? What does your fear want to protect? The shadow is filled with intelligence. It holds the blueprint for your transformation, but only if you stop treating it like a disease. It is not sickness, it is soul in exile, and it is time to bring it home. The unconscious does not speak in reason, it speaks in symbols, in patterns, in myth. It speaks through the dreams you dismiss, the synchronicities you laugh off, the fantasies you pretend not to have. It speaks through the body, the clench in your gut, when truth approaches the tightness in your chest, when you betray yourself, the fatigue that masks spiritual starvation. If you listen closely, the shadow speaks clearly. And what it wants more than anything is communion. Not indulgence, not suppression, but integration. This is inner alchemy. To take lead and make it gold. To take shame and transmute it into power. To take grief and turn it into compassion. The shadow is the crucible of the self. And unless you enter that crucible willingly, life will drag you into it, kicking and screaming through heartbreak, addiction, betrayal, collapse. Because the soul will not be ignored, not forever. The persona, your mask, is threatened by this because it has worked so hard to keep you acceptable. It has curated your identity like a gallery, clean and polished. But the real you is wild, messy, divine, and terrifying. You cannot become whole while clinging to the image of who you think you should be. That image must crack. The false self must fall, not as punishment, but as liberation. When the mask falls and the shadow rises, you begin to see clearly. You begin to understand that the parts you feared are not there to destroy you. They are your allies, your guides, your power source. But only when held with consciousness, with courage, with care. The one who integrates their shadow becomes a force of nature, not because they are fearless, but because they are whole, and wholeness cannot be manipulated. Your shadow is hungry, not for domination, but for reunion. It is not asking to take over, it is asking to be seen, to be honored, to be loved. You cannot ascend until you descend. You cannot rise into the self without passing through the underworld of your own psyche. This is the hero's journey turned inward. The dragon you must slay is not external. It is your own denial. The treasure is not gold. It is the part of you you thought was unworthy. And the only way to find it is to walk through the fire, alone, naked, without pretense. But on the other side is not death. It is resurrection. The shadow once seen becomes your sword, your compass, your truth. And with it, you no longer have to perform your power. You simply are it. Comfort is the enemy of growth. Comfort will not kill you quickly. It is far more patient than that. It seeps into your bones, wraps around your will, and whispers that you are safe, while quietly sedating the fire inside you. It calls itself peace. But it is a slow erosion, not of the body, but of the soul, of curiosity, of hunger, of wildness. You were not born to be comfortable. You were born to evolve, to crack, to break, to bleed, to rise. And yet, every instinct in your conditioned self will beg you to choose the familiar, the predictable, the numb. But make no mistake, growth does not dwell there. Growth lives where you are afraid to go. It waits in the silence beneath your distractions, in the loneliness beneath your attachments, in the grief beneath your numbness. Comfort is not rest. Comfort is the absence of transformation, and the psyche knows this. It will rebel in dreams, in mood, in illness, in longing, trying to wake you. Because the self will not be imprisoned in a life too small for the soul it carries. To grow is to shatter. It is to walk willingly into uncertainty, to peel away the masks you wear so convincingly that even you forgot what lies beneath. The persona is fed by comfort. It thrives and rolls in certainty, in the applause of others. But the self, the true self, demands sacrifice. It asks you to step beyond what is tolerable into what is true. And the truth is often brutal before it is beautiful. Jung understood this well, that psychological wholeness is not achieved by staying in the light, but by descending into the dark, into the unconscious, the repressed, the rejected, into the shadow. The part of you that never learned how to sit still in silence, the part that feeds on comfort because it cannot feel, the part that would rather stay asleep than face the terror of becoming real. But that terror is the threshold. The wound is the doorway. The storm is the initiation. Growth begins where control ends. You will never evolve by repeating what is easy. The psyche grows through tension, through paradox, through conflict. The hero must face the dragon. The alchemist must dissolve the ego. The initiate must pass through the fire. These are not metaphors. They are psychic laws, archetypes, eternal patterns moving beneath your personal story. You are not just tired. You are resisting the call. You are clinging to a life that no longer fits, but feels safer than the one that would demand everything from you. That is why you scroll. That is why you settle. That is why you keep saying tomorrow. Because the real work does not flatter the ego. It dismantles it, and the ego hates to lose. It wants comfort because comfort keeps it intact. But the soul craves expansion, and expansion is violent to what you used to be. The unconscious is not passive. It is alive, breathing, pulsing beneath every conscious choice. It is the source of your symbols, your fears, your desires, and it wants to grow. But growth demands discomfort, the feeling of disorientation, of death before rebirth. You must be willing to feel lost, to let go of identity, to let something deeper move through you. That is individuation, not a path of bliss, but of descent, of confrontation, of rupture. The moment you stop numbing the discomfort, you begin to hear the voice beneath it. The voice that says, "This life is too small for you. These habits are your cage. This identity is borrowed. Wake up, break it, burn it, become the mask you wear to survive." You learned to wear it long before you had the words to name it. Not because you were false, but because you were afraid. Because to survive in a world that does not see you, you must become what it wants to see. And so the mask formed. Slowly, carefully, a smile that cost you your grief, a laugh that hid your rage, a performance of strength stitched together from silence. You did not choose it, not consciously. It was survival, adaptation, the way a child shapes themselves to be loved. But what begins as protection becomes a prison. And one day you forget where the mask ends and you begin. You look in the mirrors and see a face. The world applauds, competent kind, put together. But you no longer recognize your own eyes. Because the soul cannot live behind a mask. It can wait, it can endure. But eventually, it begins to rot in the shadows. And when it does, symptoms appear: numbness, fatigue, anxiety, with no name. The feeling that something essential is missing. Because something is you. The persona is the mask we wear to navigate society. It is not evil, it is necessary. It lets you function, it smooths the rough edges of instinct and desire. It allows you to be a citizen, a partner, a professional. But when the persona becomes the whole of your identity, you lose touch with the depths. You forget the wild, strange, sacred things that live beneath the surface. The dreams that don't make sense, the impulses that don't obey the rules, the feelings that can't be filtered. The more you invest in the mask, the more terrifying the real becomes. And so you avoid the mirror of solitude. You avoid the pull of the inner world. You avoid anything that might crack the image. But the soul is patient. It waits in your unconscious. It speaks in your dreams, in your projections, in your pain. It waits for the day the mask slips in heartbreak, in failure and loss, when the old image shatters, and you are forced to confront the question, who am I, when I am no longer performing beneath the persona? Lives the shadow, and the parts of you that were not safe to express, the rage you swallowed, the desire you buried, the sensitivity you mocked, the brilliance you hid. All of it exiled in exchange for belonging. But it never left. It lives in the unconscious, influencing your every move. The shadow is not evil. It is everything that didn't fit the mask, and when you ignore it, it leaks out sideways. In resentment, in envy, in self-sabotage, in the quiet despair that grows in even the most successful life. Because you can win the world and still lose yourself. And that loss is not loud, it is subtle. It is the ache behind your accomplishments, the boredom behind your beauty, the emptiness behind your efficiency. You were not born to play a role. You were born to become whole. And that wholeness begins when you stop trying to be good and start becoming real. To remove the mask is not to abandon responsibility. It is to integrate truth, to become someone who acts not to be seen, but because it is aligned, because it is necessary, because it is authentic. But first, you must meet the parts of you. How the mask was designed to hide the broken child, the lost rebel, the wild mystic, the terrified lover, the part of you that cries without knowing why. These are not flaws. They are the roots of your humanity. They are the archetypes longing to be remembered. And when you embrace them not as enemies, but as oracles, you begin the descent. The sacred descent into the unconscious, to the myth of your own becoming. The hero's journey does not begin with conquest. It begins with collapse. With the realization that the life you built no longer fits the soul you carry, that the mask has become too tight, too polished, too hollow, and that behind it, something ancient is stirring. A voice that says, I cannot wear this anymore. Not because I failed, but because I outgrew it. That is the call, the rupture. The moment the false begins to crack and the real begins to rise. And it is terrifying, because the mask gave you identity. It gave you safety, and without it, you are naked, vulnerable, unknown. But you are also free. Free to feel again, free to choose again, free to become not what they expect, but what you truly are, built to obey. The psychology of conditioning. You were not born to obey. You were born to perceive, to wonder, to burn with questions that have no answers. But the moment you took your first breath, the world began its work, not with violence, but with suggestion, with soft repetition, with smiles and punishments, with stories about who you are and what is good. You learned how to shrink yourself to be loved, how to sit still to be praised, how to deny your instincts to be accepted. They called it growing up, but it was a slow hypnosis. 1,000 invisible threads pulling you toward conformity, until one day you mistook the cage for a home. That is the essence of conditioning. It is not forced upon you. It is installed within you. It becomes your inner voice, your inner judge, the invisible architecture of your every decision. You no longer need to be controlled. You control yourself. You censor your own truth. You doubt your own fire. You become the warden of your own soul, mistaking obedience for safety. Conditioning is not merely external. It becomes psychological. It embeds itself into the very soil of your unconscious. The mind does not simply remember, it repeats. Patterns passed down through generations, through culture, through institutions dressed as caretakers, the teacher who rewarded silence, the parent who praised obedience but punished emotion, the system that told you, be productive, be polite, be normal, don't feel too much, don't speak too loud, don't want too deeply. And so your wildness was folded into shame, your intuition was filed away beneath facts, your spontaneity suffocated under the weight of what's appropriate. The psyche learned not how to thrive, but how to survive. And the cost was invisibly devastating, because the soul cannot bloom in a climate of fear. But the unconscious never forgets. It holds the blueprint of who you were before the world molded you. It holds the memory of your rawness, your chaos, your divinity, and it speaks not in commands, but in symbol, in dreams that make no sense, in impulses you suppress, in sudden waves of grief with no name. It speaks through the shadow, the aspects of yourself that were banished to preserve the mask. You think you're making free choices, but most of what you do is reflex. Most of what you fear was taught. Most of what you believe was installed. The matrix is not just a system outside you. It is the psychological inheritance of every civilization that taught you to be small, to be manageable, to be good. To break conditioning is not to rebel. It is to remember who you were before you were taught to doubt. It is to question the voice inside that says, don't go too far. Don't speak too honestly. Don't shine too brightly. That voice is not you. It is your training. It is the internalized chorus of every authority you bent for. Every time you swallowed your truth to keep the peace. Every time you said yes when your soul said no. Jung called this the process of individuation, not rebellion for its own sake, but the slow, painful, holy path of becoming what you are. It begins the moment you ask, what if I've been living someone else's life? What if the rules I follow aren't sacred but inherited? What if obedience has become a form of self-betrayal? The mask you wear to survive becomes the face you forget isn't yours. And beneath that mask is a being untouched by conditioning. A being that doesn't ask for permission to exist, that doesn't need approval to feel joy, that doesn't negotiate its worth. That being is the self. And it is buried not beneath trauma, but beneath obedience. The compulsion to be accepted, to be safe, to be predictable. But the self is not safe. It is sacred. It is the storm and the stillness, the flame and the void. And it calls you always through discomfort, through discontent, through the quiet agony of a life that looks good on paper, but feels like a performance. That feeling is not failure. It is the call to awaken, to confront the invisible chains that still guide your hands.